oftentimes I don't question why I'm attracted to something. I just let myself do it.
Hi, art lovers, and welcome back once again to my little corner of the podcast world to Beyond the Palette. I'm Whitney Rosenson, your host and owner of Art Dimensions. If you're curious about contemporary art, how it gets made, and by whom, you are listening to the right podcast. I'm so excited to be interviewing Franceska Schifrin today, a very talented, soulful, and internationally followed figurative expressionist painter who is fairly new to the Art Dimensions roster. Hi, Franceska.
Hey, Whitney, it's nice to be here.
Thank you for being here. Welcome to Beyond the Palette. How are you?
I'm doing great today. Yeah.
Great. Oh, that's great. Well, thank you for guesting and for welcoming all of us into your creative world. How long have you been painting, and were you creative as a youngster?
Well, I've been seriously paint. I did go to art school, so I was attempting my most serious painting self then. I went to School of Visual Arts in New York.
Okay.
Before that, I definitely was creative and I often painted and drew. I also grew up in both a home and a community that was filled with the arts. So just kind of in the air all the time.
Yeah. And I know you had a special relationship with your father, who was also an artist. So I'm curious, you said there was art in the home and there was art there was art in your home growing up, but how did the relationship with your father influence your work? And can you tell us a little bit about the trip that you took with him, or how it all
Yeah,
began?
for sure. Absolutely. So, yeah, specifically, so yes, my father was a painter and that's what he was always and forever. So, it wasn't a distant experience in the house. His studio was there, his work was there, his friends who were for the most part artists of one kind or another were everywhere. So that's sort of what I mean, at least in part, by it being in the air.
Right.
And as well as on the walls or in the yard or in the studios or those kind of things. But then specifically when I was living in New York, he invited me to help him with a trip that he took once a year. He took a group of students down into different parts of the world. So alternately, he would take a group to Mexico, and he invited me on that trip where we had models to work from, and we went out on the street and sketched, and it was set up like you're living and working there, being inspired by Mexico, which is exactly what was happening. And I fell in love with that experience. It really, I think, both jumped my painting game. I really excelled at that. It felt really comfortable. It felt I was incredibly inspired and passionate, and so I worked a lot from that experience.
Right.
And then continued up until this day to find the opportunities to go places to do work like that, to try to immerse myself in other cultures.
Okay. What year did you go to Mexico with your father? When was that? Just so I can get a...
It's 78, 79, something like that. Just caveat, I'm no good with years, so that's probably the best one you're going to get.
Okay. But you have been painting for many, many years. Okay, what are your favorite materials to work with and why?
I'll work with anything that seems appropriate to get my message across. So I don't have any, I'm not exclusionary. I might be best known for my oil paintings, perhaps. It's definitely the thing, when I'm doing something large or larger, that's what I love to do. I also really like to use gouache and mixed media. One of the things that happened, which then again expanded some of the work that I did, was also around not so much the medium I was using, but the materials. So I mean, I paint on glass, I paint on wood, I paint on found objects, I'll paint on cardboard. But one time and again, don't remember the years of the Bosnian Croatian wars, but I was in Sarajevo within days of the Sarajevan library being bombed. It was I think 100th anniversary. Anyway, so it was targeted because it was that anniversary. And I was walking through the rubble of this astounding, ornate, beautiful multi-storied big stones, arches, and you could just imagine some amazing, right, building that would be have been built in the 1800s. And the ashes were so thick and deep from all of the paper and book and transcripts and stuff that had been burned that literally it came up to my thigh. Like, it was hard to walk at times. And then there were piles of rubble and then ash on top of that. Anyway, it was a really horrific and awe-inspiring experience to be in that space. But at a certain point, and I to this day, I don't know why, but I had walked up this sort of pile of rubble and ash, and I reached in, and the ash was still warm, right, to the touch, because it was so thick, and there are places that were still smoldering. And I felt something kind of firm, and I pulled on it, and I realized it was still paper that hadn't completely burned. And at the time, I just rolled it up and stuck it in my backpack, and it wasn't a safe place to be. So I wasn't lingering there. And I did not open up the paper until I got back to Los Angeles. And it turned out to be maps of Bosnia. And they were all but singed around the edges and burned. And I knew as soon as I saw them that I had to draw on them. And it was hard because I felt like I needed to honor what I had in my hand, just as an artifact. Anyway, so I did, and hopefully I made something that was, that mattered enough. I was working on images of the war at the time, so that was certainly what I did on those maps. But so that experience of working on something that was relevant to to the images that I was wanting to make, right, and it added to it, has come back around a number of times now. And the pieces that I think you're familiar with, maybe some of the ledger pieces, which are from Haiti. Yeah. Again, it was this wonderful story where a dear friend of mine, who for generations and generations has had coffee plantations, his family has had coffee plantations in Haiti, and they were clearing out their offices and trying to get into the computer age, right? Instead of back in these, ledgers, they were throwing away. It was probably hundreds of these big, huge ledger books that the business had used literally since the I think I have some from 1820 or 1830 to write their daily logs in, right? So I grabbed those. And so again, for quite some time, I really felt like I only, I needed to create images from Haiti to be applicable to that. I must say now I use those just as a beautiful template to work on. But yeah, so that sort of goes to the, materials.
Your inspiration. The ledger pieces, I just want everyone to know, you can see those on the Art Dimensions website, which is artdimensionsonline.com, and click on the word artists in the upper right-hand corner, and then scroll till you see Franceska's name, and you can click on her thumbnail, and that will take you to her page, and you can see some of these pieces on ledger that she's talking about, and some of her other incredible pieces. You've also traveled, I know, I'm just going to mention a few of the countries that you've been to because I find it so incredible. I mean, I love to travel as well, but Cuba, Haiti, Uganda, Guatemala, Jamaica, I know I'm missing a few, Bosnia-Herzegovina. So you're so inspired. You're inspired partially by the countries that you're in, the images that you see. But tell me and tell the listeners about this, how your work has changed. I mean, it started, maybe your older work was a little more dark or a little more exemplary of the horrible things that were going on during wartime. And then now the pieces that I'm at least familiar with and the pieces that are on my website are a little bit more like, I don't want to say lighter, but the color palette is bright and they're like subtle scenes of Haiti or daily life in Haiti and Cuba. So when did that shift take place, and can you get into that a little bit?
Yeah, so I'm not sure that I would have said it was a shift. I think that there's always been both of those works in my work, and that oftentimes more, I must say, not in my head, but in other people's, and that there's a separation
Right.
between those two. Although, like that said, there are some caveats. Like when I was working in the war in Bosnia and Croatia, I mean, yes, there's some sweet scenes, but they're all surrounded by, the horror of war. Whereas in places like Haiti, there's more of an ebb and flow. One, I've also just spent year after year after year there, so that sometimes I go and it's the politics that I'm interested in doing, and then other times I go and it's quieter, or just where I happen to be is more about family life and everyday life. So I've really always been attracted to all of that. I think of myself as like a social expressionist. So it doesn't have to involve politics, but I often do think of our social world in a political realm as well. So I'm hoping to hold all of that.
You do. I've seen your work. You do. I'm sorry I suggested that it was a shift, and I'm glad that you clarified that it wasn't a shift. So that's very helpful for me. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's fine. Yeah, I think it's just, yeah, I mean, it's easy to see one grouping or the other, and oftentimes my work is grouped in one group or another.
Describe your aesthetic in 3 words.
Wow. I guess passion, color, I don't know, humanity, maybe.
Fantastic. That's great.
I'll probably come up with another 3 later, but anyway, right? That's off the
Okay.
cuff.
Okay. A lot of your paintings, I've noticed, integrate the perspective of motherhood. So let's talk about that for a minute. How and why does that work its way into some of your paintings from Haiti, or maybe even the others?
Everywhere. I don't think there's a place that I don't look at motherhood. I look at motherhood and I look at childhood, right? So both sides of that coin. Well, one, I'm a woman, and I have been a mother for a long time. And even before I was a mother, that was something that was interesting to me. I think it's a way in for me. It's a way in to humanity. It's a symbol that I think we can all understand. I mean, I'm not really thinking of it that way, but like if you ask that question,
Now you're thinking of that, yeah.
right, yeah, it's always attracted me. So oftentimes I don't question why I'm attracted to something. I just let myself do it. And that's something that is, over and over and over again. It's also even like from a what's the word, like the logistic sort of situation as well. When the way that I often work when I'm traveling anyway, not when I'm in my studio, but is I'm on the street or I'm outside wherever it is, and I'm looking at people, and I'm often with a sketchbook, which the wonderful thing about that as opposed to a camera is that it's not at all intimidating. And in fact, what it does is it brings people to you, as opposed to, my husband has worked as a photojournalist and an art photographer for years, and we're often side by side. And I travel a lot with photojournalists when I travel in difficult places, and they often get a lot of pushback right? That people are like, don't take a picture or get away or blah, blah, the people are uncomfortable and they don't know what exactly you're taking a picture of. And with me, they can see my sketchbook. And of course, also usually it's something that they think is really funny because they're just I'm drawing these like wacky things, and not at all specifically beautifully done since I'm more of an expressionist, right? But
Right.
meaning or they'll play a game like oftentimes like okay, who's she drawing? Who's she doing? So outside, often it is also women and children who are there for me to see and interact with, and who I'm not sure, maybe even just have, maybe it's different social mores too, that it's easier for them to come and, feel comfortable and for us to interact.
And I'm just imagining that you go to marketplaces, you go to what sort of other
Well, or
areas?
just the street. So, depending upon where you're going, what country, like, many of the countries that I like to travel and work in are much more, the whole life is much more outside.
Outside. Like, let's talk about Haiti. Well, let's talk about the color palette. Why the use of the primary and the bold colors a lot of the time for you?
So it is a very vibrant and colorful place. I respond emotionally to color.
Mhm.
So if I'll pick up just on one color element that I see, and I'll just spread it to the entire canvas, and then work back from there.
Oh, wow.
I mean, it certainly doesn't always happen, but many, many times I've felt a color and it's like, okay, I want to do a blue thing, right? And so I'm gonna almost fill up this whole canvas with some blues
Right.
that I'm feeling, and then like that becomes my base.
Yeah.
And so then it permeates.
Okay. And the painting behind you, I'll take a
That's actually similar ideas, right? Where I painted, that's exactly that. That's actually from Cuba, but I painted that like almost all kind of yellows, not a solid one kind of yellow, but and then like brought out the image.
and the fruit and the yep. So listeners, I'm going to take a screenshot of this and it'll be on my blog. But the title of that painting is Morning. No, what is
Yeah,
it
I
again?
think it's Yellow Morning, in
Yeah,
fact,
right.
as I recall. But yeah,
Yeah,
something.
that is
Yeah,
beautiful. Just
thank
beautiful.
you, thank you. And so again, in that my times in Cuba, there are a lot more domestic scenes, internal, like interhouse. I don't know how to say that, right? Home,
Yeah.
domestic scenes. That's just because that was where I was and where I had access to, and how, what I was seeing and doing. Haiti, I certainly have many of those as well, but a lot more just life is done outside. I mean, the cooking outside. I'll often too do things because, like as I was describing, when I sit to draw somewhere, so whether that's in like India or Nepal or Morocco, or I mean, I can end up with a huge crowd of people, and honestly, I have to stop drawing because I can't see anything anymore. Right. So, I mean, that's happened a lot of times. It's like, okay, I get, and it's fun and nice and whatever. And then it's like, I've got to figure out another space. So, what I've realized too, it's almost like, or maybe it isn't almost, it is like voyeurism. But in Haiti, there are places that I know where I can go on a rooftop,
Right.
right? And so I can see things and I can watch the street and I can watch interactions, and I can see, like people's yards and, things like that, so that I can keep looking and getting some ideas down
Undisturbed.
and not be disturbed, and not have, people, because oftentimes people will start teasing. It's like, oh, they're painting you, she's drawing you. And then, somebody's really upset or, they get nervous or, and, want to move on. And
But
so,
I wouldn't say it's voyeurism. I mean, I wouldn't.
no, it's just, I mean, it's not, I'm not infringing on anybody's privacy. And
Right.
also, because of course of what my images ultimately are, I'm not taking a specific person's experience and bringing it forward and doing
Yeah,
that.
they're universe. I feel like your images are statements or are not statements, but they're suggestions of universal happenings, universal emotions that everybody feels, that everybody, and most women especially, maybe with the
Mhm.
child scenes.
Right. Yeah.
So what do you hope people will get from your paintings when they look at them?
Yeah, I don't even know that I have an answer to that
Okay.
question. Yeah. Every once in a while, someone will say, like, will talk to me about their experience of a painting. And, sometimes it's like, oh, yeah, great. That's spot on. But other times it's not. And yeah, I'm not really thinking about
About
that.
that.
Yeah.
Okay. What's your favorite aspect about being an artist? And what's the hardest part about being an artist?
For me, the gift of being an artist is being able to spend time looking and contemplating and just the things around me. I can walk, and in order to usually do my work, I can walk through the world kind of with a different lens. Like I don't have, when I'm thinking about my work and when that's what my focus is, I can let go, of some of the daily, riffraff of,
Stuff.
stuff that we have to deal with. The other thing too, which was said quite a while ago, a number of years ago, actually, and it was when I was working with a number of photojournalists. I was spending most of my days with journalists and photojournalists, and they were saying how they'd come back, they'd be frustrated because they didn't quite get their shot, or, well, I can't really quote that person, and it's like, or we know that this was the jerk who did this horrible thing, but I can't really say it because we don't have proof, even though everybody knows, and these kind of things. And I said, what's so wonderful is that I get to paint the truth, or at least my truth, and I don't have to worry about the facts.
Yeah.
So to I can just go to that. I can go to my truth. So literally, whether it's about some amazingly beautiful flower and it's just a painting about vase of flowers, or a mountainside, or yeah, family and their moment together, I can put it together as my truth, and I can just hang on to it for that. And that's really a gift. I think that's a wonderful thing to be able to do.
That's an incredible way to put it. And what's the hardest part about being an artist? Or do you find anything hard about being an artist?
Well, yeah, making money for sure. That's it. I wish it was like, that would be amazing if it was just, I don't know, if there was some sort of, but I mean, we don't live in a socialist country particularly anyway, but baseline support,
Right.
and then, something else.
So making money. So do you mean, it's hard to market and sell your work in addition to creating your work? Do you want to get into it more specifically, or?
Yeah, well, I don't know that it's that interesting. I mean, it's true that, yeah, in general, right, artists aren't usually great marketers, and they're not great business people. And I certainly haven't been a great business person. Yeah, I think that's true. So otherwise, perhaps we being artists might actually have an easier time. I don't know if that was, but it's kind of like a different kind of a brain for the
Yeah.
most part. Yeah, just having to. So I do think that there have been times. It's been a while, because I must say I haven't been. Well, whatever. It's been a little while. Financial viability has come into play to affect the work that I do,
Okay.
and then I don't care for that experience. Other
Okay.
people do, so that's fine. But for me, I don't care for that experience.
Okay. Fair enough. And by the way, I just want everyone to know, you can follow us on Instagram. Our Instagram handles are at Art Dimensions, and I'm going to spell Franceska's name. Her Instagram handle is at Franceska Schifrin, FranceskaSchifrin, and it will be in the blog. So don't worry if you missed that spelling, but you can follow us on Instagram. That would be awesome. Franceska, what sort of art do you show in your own house? I know Yellow Morning is hanging right behind you, but do you only show your own work, or do you show others?
No, not at all. Yeah. So I'm looking around. I see my husband is an artist. So we have some of his work up right now. I have something of my father's. I have a Roscoe. I have Katie Kolwitz. I have friends of mine. Our work is always changing.
Yeah.
So if you were to come into our home, yeah, one time you would see, photographs. Another time you would see etchings and prints or big paintings. I have hundreds and hundreds of pieces of work from around the world and from the United States, from artists and friends. And so it's just always revolving.
That's so cool.
Yeah, all the time. I have a lot of masks from different parts of Africa and Native American stuff. I mean, yeah, just all over the place. It's yeah.
Amazing. I would love to see photographs of some of the works on your home. I really would. All right. How do you stay motivated? This is a lot for other artists to hear about and just, my general audience, but how do you stay motivated to keep creating?
So for me, I need to give myself space away from, yeah, the daily chores of stuff. I have a studio here at my house, and it's really great, even when I'm not feeling motivated, to get my butt down there and just to be there. Sometimes it can really be even just re-looking at my work. I mean, and sometimes too, it's actually pulling a book, a Picasso, off of my shelf and just re-looking.
Right.
Going to see original art for sure is fantastic for me. It's pretty rare that I don't go to a museum and end up like, okay, I want to go home and paint, right? Like, get me out of here because now I want to go. So, and that can be from, I just see a brush or a composition or it reminds me of something else that I haven't done yet in my head. So there's that. I also, well, for me, travel just is really wonderful to get me again. I think it's traveling, what going to another culture often does for me is I think because of my ignorance, just by definition, right, that it's not my culture, lends me to seeing things more symbolically and more simply so that I can just zoom in on specific images. My head isn't cluttered with all of the other stuff that it might mean. That, for instance, if, when you look at my house, you look at, like, I see a picture of you right now, or the kind of shirt that somebody's wearing, or the kind of earbuds you have, or the kind of, I have all sorts of stuff. I could be totally wrong, but I have all sorts of ideas about the whys and wherefores about that because it's my culture. It's interesting for me to go to a place where it's more streamlined for me anyway to the visual and emotional,
Okay.
because that's where
Your truth.
I, yeah, and where right where I do my artwork from. Yeah.
Is that fair to say? That's where your truth is?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Well, Franceska, this has been so fantastic. Thank you for chatting with me today on Beyond the Palette. Listeners, please check out artdimensionsonline.com. Check out Franceska's page. If you have any questions, you can email me or call me. Thank you for tuning in. Remember to follow us on Instagram. And if you have a minute, please rate and review this podcast to help us expand our reach. And everybody, thank you for tuning in. And to Franceska and all of you out there listening, have a happy week and happy creating.